and we're here today on Tuesday, February 16th, 2010. Commissioners present are Commissioner Tour, Commissioner Perlman, and Commissioner Domenico. And we're here at 2:45-ish with a presentation from our Land Use Department, and this is a public hearing, docket BCCP 10-0001, Boulder County Comprehensive Plan Revision for Allens Park. And we have a presentation and a discussion, and this is a hearing. The hearing is a project update, so we don't have action to be taken from today, but we do have new information that we'd like to take a look at. So, Gary, take it away.
Thank you. Gary Sanfason, Land Use Department. I'm going to be really brief here. This is a public hearing, but as you said, there will be no action taken. It's an update, and the 747 Community Project will be providing that update. I'll be available for any questions and fill in comments here and there. So I want to pass this over immediately to the project management team of that group. It's Joy Spatz, Jeff Colin, and JP Brazil. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for the opportunity to give this update. Jeremy, am I okay? We have a slide presentation today that's going to briefly outline where we are. We've spent the last year gathering input from the community through summer sessions and working groups, and we've published a draft of our vision statement and goals, and a brief overview of those categories include being good stewards for the environment, preserve our unique quality of life, preserve personal property rights, and maintain our transportation corridors for safety. We have established several working groups moving forward to wrestle with the issues that have come out of our community survey. The working groups are organized by category. We have a house size group, a residential policies group, building materials and fire mitigation, a business group, technology, septic and sanitation, forest health, and an advisory group. We'd like to give an overview of the goals that have been established thus far for each one of those groups. House size, our goal there is to develop alternatives to the existing house size regulations and make them consistent with the character within the area. So that will be for Allens Park Town Site and Raymond Riverside and the Peak-to-Peak corridor. We also wish to develop proposals to establish a quantitative measure for visible criteria for structures. And all of the proposals established would be based on community input. If you guys have any questions as we go along, stop us. Okay. Residential policy goal is to establish policies that simplify the integration and triggers for this site plan review, build smart, transportation, and other elements within policies. Building materials and fire mitigation goals are to allow materials consistent with character of the area and balance that with the fire mitigation strategies. Business goals would be to increase business opportunities within the area, including along Peak-to-Peak Highway. Business zoning reinstatement back to the pre-1984. There are some possibilities for new business zoning. I would say that on behalf of the business group, this isn't widespread, but there are some areas where they'd like to see some adjustment. And moreover, they'd like to create a 747 Mountain District business zoning that would cover lodging, restaurants, and event centers. Some of the technology goals would be to just figure out what it takes to get high-speed internet and cable or cell service in the area, and to evaluate the existing policies as they relate to alternative energy. Septic and sanitation, the goals there are to establish policy mods that enable consideration of the significant restraints within certain districts within the 747 area, to research best practices and emerging technologies, to establish baselines for the existing water quality and test data for failed septic systems so that the community can be clearly informed as the conditions that exist as a baseline. Forest health, our goal is to establish ways to support the existing and ongoing community beetle kill and wildfire protection plan efforts. Those are already in place, and we'd like to make sure that those are reflected in the plan. And then finally, we have an advisory group whose goal is to develop options that would enable us to have an ongoing local voice in shaping county policies that impact 747 district and motivate individual and community into action. Our overall timeline, we are in the process of developing options. We will complete those in March for the purposes of issuing them via survey to the community for comment. And that survey, the results are due end of April, early May, at which point the input from that survey would go back to the working groups, and they'll be creating final policies over the summer. We hope to have the final policies done in a manner that we can solicit community comment. And then we hope to have a final plan ready in the fall of 2010. We do have a question about how to best engage you. And in speaking with Gary, we'd like to suggest we have a study group or a working session in May once the survey results are in and we know where we're headed in terms of what the community would like, so that we can really work hard and uncover what it takes to achieve those results. We'd like to know if you guys would be up for that and what your overall thoughts are about how to engage with us. Hello?
Before you hand off, could we get your name and address for the record, please?
Yes, my name is Joy Spatz. My address is 2426 Riverside Drive, Raymond.
Thank you.
Okay. So that's our last slide.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
I guess I had a number of questions. It may be that it's just too early to be able to answer them. And there's, I think, a lot of meat to the issues that are being raised on each one of these slides. And I guess my mind immediately jumps to wanting to know sort of what sort of proposal options you're looking at and how those are being crafted. Perhaps you could describe a little bit, just sort of in general, for the set of goals that you're looking at. How are you crafting options for the community to take a look at?
Each one of the working groups might have a number of participants. Could be 3 or 4 people, could be 7 or 8. There might be some larger groups out there I'm not aware of. But those working groups are getting together and working on what is it within the policies that need to be changed, and what information would they need in order to craft options. So the purpose of getting a survey out is really to put together several different options for the community to comment on. And so the working groups are actually in the thick of it right now and aren't ready to propose specific options for each one of these working groups.
Could I add something to that too? The land use department is working with these groups. We have a planner from Development Review Division that is available, and as well as an intern to do research on each of these areas, what other communities have done, and work with those folks to develop proposed new language, etc. And that's just beginning that process.
Other questions? Not at the moment.
So I guess one other thing I'd add is, I think it would be helpful in some ways for you all to, I think some of the things they'd like to know is how to engage you, obviously. So they don't come in October with a complete surprise. How do they engage you along the way? So it's a conversation. So one of the ideas is to have a joint PC, BOCC study session in May. Once they've got specifics, more in place, and they've heard from the community. So that's one option. And then the other thing I think that would be helpful for the community is to get your response to some of the things you heard in the goals and policies they're suggesting. Like, for instance, they're talking about looking at how other communities form advisory boards to give them a voice in their community, and that's something. Is that something that's viable? Something you're open to? Obviously, it's not really figured out yet, but is that something generally you're willing to consider? The other one is the business zoning. That's another committee that's gone down the road a little more than others and has some specific ideas. So it might be helpful if you're willing to give them some specific feedback on that.
Cindy, may I make a comment?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, if
And
we
John,
name-
Pa-
yeah, thanks.
John Paul Brazil, 10523 Highway 7, Allens Park, Colorado, 80510.
thank you.
And Cindy, Will, and Ben, with regard to the advisory group goal, one of the issues that came out of our initial survey was that the residents, landowners of Allens Park area fire district did not feel that they had the kind of representation that they would desire. The goal of the advisory group is to establish a body that would have ongoing relationship with you. And so, adjacent to what Gary was mentioning a while ago, when we start to establish our dialogue with you, we need to understand how we can form, and again, this is one of the you asked the question, what kind of proposals are we putting forward, and I can answer that with regard to the advisory group. We're desiring to have, for lack of a better word at this point in time, an institutionalized body blessed by the BOCC that would act kind of like the Planning Commission. It would be like a local planning commission. That's one of the options. To fully understand what's going on in your heads with regard to future policy, and that can represent us in making sure you understand what it is about our character in our area that we want to maintain and preserve, the kind of lifestyle we want to lead. And so it's something that came forward in all of the feedback that we got from the community. So when Gary is talking about how do we engage you, this probably is one of the most important issues that we have for establishing and maintaining a long-term relationship with the BOCC. So as we go forward with our planning, culminating in a set of proposals to you this fall, the one issue of the advisory group or planning commission, whatever you want to call it, local planning commission, is to establish a long-term relationship with you. Thank you.
Thanks. Maybe we should proceed with the public hearing piece before we respond to all the details. Anybody else has anything at the moment?
I'll wait till after the hearing.
Okay. We do have several speakers who'd like to talk with us. And just a reminder to the three of you, it's Mary Hill, Linnea Carter, and Greg Falconer. The light system up here is probably familiar to you, maybe not. We actually have a 3-minute limit on the length of time to speak, but you're welcome to come up and speak with us for 3 minutes. The green light is solid green for 2 full minutes, flashing green for 1 minute, and then amber at 30 seconds. That's when you need to wrap it up pretty much, and red is when you need to stop. So we'll, I think, go ahead and let folks proceed with speaking with us. And the first one on the list is Mary Hill. So Mary, if you'd like to come up. And please state your name and address for the record when you come up to the mic. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Mary Hill. I'm at 1506 Riverside Drive. Okay, and I'm not going to take my full 3 minutes. Okay, I can tell you that now. One of the things I'd be most interested in hearing you address later or now is, so let me actually back up a little bit. First, wanted to express my support for this effort. I actually personally haven't been as involved in it as a lot of these other people have. They've put tremendous amounts of time into it. And then my specific thing was, I'd be really interested in understanding from your point of view the flexibility you might or might not have about housing size issues, and also about visibility, and in particular, for my purposes, solar panels. And the restrictions that you have, sort of the things you have firm in your mind. We're really not, you guys can talk as much as you want, but we're not really going to budge on these. And which ones you think, well, we can see how individual situations could warrant variations in what's currently planned. So if you can address that when you get to it, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, Linnea Carter.
Actually, I don't think I'm going to make any comments at this time. Is that okay?
That's okay.
We should note for the record that Linnea Carter chose not to speak since we may not have gotten that on the tape. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And Greg Falconer.
I'll pass.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
Mr. Falconer declined to speak. Thank you.
Wow. That's got to be a record, actually. Okay, so does anyone else who did not sign up that would like to speak during the public hearing section of the comments? No one? Okay. Yep. There's one in the back. Okay. Come on up, and same routine. You get to state your name and address for the record, and you have 3 minutes if you'd like.
Thank you. Candace Chapin, number 3, County Road 82, Allens Park. I just wanted to say just a viewpoint and let you know how hard that our community is working. You know that we've been here in mass sometimes, and there was a lot of energy going on, but this community is working very, very hard. The people have been meeting for a minimum at least of a year, and some longer. At least twice a week, and then there are also additional community meetings that people are having in the 3 communities, and each one of the areas has developed their own ideas, and they've been funneled back to the main group. And now these working groups are working on that. In addition, we've had 3 larger community meetings last year to get started, to get a huge amount of input. And we had a really excellent survey that has been chewed over and mulled over. I just want to let you know how hard our community is working to make sure that we understand what our community wants, and then also to find ways to figure out how to write that up, how to look at the regulations that you've already set in place, and how to figure out to work with you. So I want you to just know the human piece that's going on in here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Okay. Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing portion of the discussion this afternoon and turn to any questions that we might have for anyone else at this point. Gary, do you have any other comments you'd like to add right now?
The only last thing I'll say is Abby Janis has been working on the evaluation of special uses, has been up to Allens Park recently and had a meeting there. It was well attended. So you know, those processes are happening in parallel and in full involvement with the community. So.
Okay. Thanks. And again, just a reminder that we're here as with a project update primarily, that there's no specific action that will be taken, just restate that. So whatever our thoughts, we don't have a course of action specifically that we're going to recommend right now. Comments?
Sure, I'd be happy to make some comments. First, I'd really like to thank everybody who's been working on this. As as has been mentioned, there have been some meetings in the past where we've had large numbers of residents from the Allens Park area, and clearly at times the relationship has not been as positive as we would all hope for, and I think it's really a very positive thing seeing the town site planning process and the 747 community planning process moving forward. I think it's going to be hard to give a lot of detail in terms of what ultimately we're going to think on any one of these issues, because in most of these arenas the goals are still relatively general, and I know that you're going to be fleshing out policy options, and so it's I can't say what we're going to think of any of those particular options. What I think I would say is that I think that we really entered this process in good faith, and I kind of learned long ago that you don't try to empower a committee and then ignore their advice. That's not generally a smart way to go. So it doesn't mean that we will end up agreeing with everything that comes out of this, but I think that we're all committed to engaging with it in good faith and really trying to listen and understand the recommendations that you bring forward, and work with you on whether we can really come to some agreement on how to move forward. A few specific thoughts. When it comes to what an advisory committee looks like, and what exactly its powers and structure might be, no idea what the right answer is, but I think that the idea of creating a structure that allows for that continuing input in a very real fashion from the community makes an awful lot of sense to me, and I think we would want to work with you on how that should be structured and what its role should be. But it strikes me as a very positive thing to be able to have that sort of ongoing dialogue, and in particular the aspect of being able to understand what the community is thinking, and for the community to be able to understand what we're thinking early in the process of decision making, so that we don't get misunderstandings on either side, and are at least able to move forward with a full understanding of what those interests and values are. When it comes to some of the other areas that are perhaps more fleshed out in terms of the business goals, from my perspective, I think I'm very open to the notion of working with you to come up with some appropriate set of rules and zoning for business activities in the area. I doubt that wouldn't have a lot of interest in creating some large number of businesses that were regional, that were new businesses that were regional in nature, as you see in some other areas. But the idea of making sure that we have rules in place that nurture the existing businesses and don't get in the way of their operations, and allows some flexibility so that they can respond to changing times, and to take a look at it, is there some other incremental growth of business that would serve the community? I mean, to me, that concept makes an awful lot of sense. The other things that are in here, there aren't really specific proposals yet. They're kind of the issues that I think I would have guessed we would be talking about in terms of house size, and are there any ways of on the SPR of streamlining the process, and what of that issue of can we come up with some approach that recognizes some of the unique characteristics and makes it a little bit easier to go through the process when you're not doing something that's really major. I think we'd be very open to that. When it comes to things like fire mitigation and building materials, then what's the appropriate balance there? I think that's something which I would need to see the proposals, and would need to make sure that we had some of the technical people in the fire fire safety and fire mitigation side weighing in, so we understood what those trade-offs are. But certainly happy to have that conversation, and I would say something very similar when it comes to septic systems and sanitation. That I think we would need to, well, that's one where we would really need to have public health involved, since ultimately, in fact, they're the decision makers rather than the BOCC. But before we could weigh in on it, I think it would be important for us to make sure that in addition to understanding the community perspective on it, we understood the technical perspective from the public health folks and try to sort that through. So, I mean, in terms of other goals, can't really quibble with trying to understand what it would take to have cell phone service and high-speed internet, and don't know exactly, again, what that looks like, but I think we'd be happy to have that conversation. As you move forward, would be very interested in understanding what the concerns are in terms of renewable energy. We did adopt a new set of rules a number of months ago, which I think make it much easier to do small-scale wind generation than the previous rules, and I think have clarified that for folks who are doing solar systems that are serving just their property as opposed to larger-scale solar systems serving multiple properties, if it's on your property, if it's on your building, it's basically a use by right. You just get a building permit for. If it's a ground-mounted system, there's a very simple process through site plan review waiver that's really about location more than about whether you can do it or not. So as you move forward, would love to understand what the concerns are there and whether there's a sense that we didn't get that piece quite right or not. But with that, I mean, I would just say I really look forward to working with the group. I think it would be helpful as the policy options are developed. I would love to have an opportunity for us to see those policy options and give some input on whether there are other options that we think would make sense, for the community to consider, just to make sure that that whole universe of options is being considered when you do the community survey. So would love to have an opportunity to engage at some level before the survey goes out. In addition to, I think it would be very helpful once the survey is done. I like that idea of a joint study session with Planning Commission and representatives from the 747 project. So I guess that'd be my thoughts.
Well, many similar thoughts. One is that it is hard to know precisely what kind of opinion to have about things that are not yet fully formed, and that's the nature of the beast. And frankly, one of the real sticking points about actually getting to concrete proposals is even a number of these talk about either a conflict or a balance between a couple of values that you hold. Even just building materials, you want it to be used. You want to use materials that make sense given the character of the area, but you also want to make sure that the materials you use don't lead to fires that either threaten a structure or your neighbor. And so I think at some point you have to figure out what that really means, and we'll probably want to make sure that we're not increasing fire danger in the county. That's a pretty significant issue. But again, it's that notion that there's a balance between, or you're torn in a couple different directions by different values that matter to you. That becomes the really tricky thing to do. And there's a couple other places where you're talking about basically allowing a certain amount of change that's consistent with the character of the community. Well, we all know that defining the character of a community is not an easy thing. In fact, character of a community means probably something different to all of us, even when we're talking about the same area. And so to know whether something is consistent or not is, of course, tricky. And that's why we end up with comprehensive plans that try to put into place sort of the general sense of principles that all of this gets interpreted against. And I think it's probably fair to note that we think that the comprehensive, or at least I think the comprehensive plan is an important backdrop for all of this. That's the document that, in the absence of everything else, talks about what it is we value, what we care about, what we want to preserve, what we want to see maintained. And part of that is that we are going collectively to try to live fairly lightly on the land, particularly in our up in the mountains where it is a little more fragile. And if you dig up an area and it takes a lot of years for it to come back, or it erodes seriously. And so there is that notion that we want to be good stewards, and that may at some point mean that we don't do everything that we want to do, and we hope that our neighbors won't do the same. Hard to come up with actual regulations that talk about that. The other suggestion that I have is, and this is really difficult to do. I mean, my experience is to look forward into the future and see the cumulative effect of the changes that we're talking about, and wanting to make sure that even if this is okay in this instance, if that's repeated on every property or half the properties or a quarter of the properties, what it looks like, and making sure that we're still comfortable with that. But I would join with Will in saying most of what he said. I think I'm glad that people are working so hard. I think this is very constructive work, and we're very much on the right path. I appreciate all the energy that people have put into it. I'm hopeful that what you will discover in terms of the changes that you hope to see happen are things that resonate with us, and we incorporate it elsewhere into the code, that we really use the hard work that you do to see what it is that we may need to be doing more generally. I like the idea of ongoing dialogue and debate and discussion about the issues that affect our lands and our lives, and I don't know what the appropriate way of doing that. We have so many advisory committees and commissions, and it's a little daunting to think that we would have geographically based ones everywhere. Maybe Allen's Park's the special case, and you're the only ones who want to put in this kind of effort. But I think whenever we make a set of decisions, that we really have to recognize that others might want to do the same, and so we'll want to be thoughtful and careful about that particular road we go down. But I appreciate the work, and I appreciate the interest in preserving and building a community that makes sense to you. Again, it's hard to take issue with anything in particular. I very much hope that as we come together, that there's significant alignment, and because we don't live up there every day, but we care about it a lot too. So.
And I'm going to join with my colleagues in agreeing with the majority of what they've said, and just point out a few specific things that are of interest to me. I think, these 3 geographic areas are such a wonderful part of the county, and I know I've appreciated them since I was a little kid, when we would drive up on Sundays and see the place where you live, realize that it's a spectacular, wonderful, and unique area, and hopefully do a little business in some of the smaller businesses there. But I've never lived there, and so can't appreciate it from your perspective. And so just want to say that the work that you've done is very important, and we do recognize that people have put a lot of time and effort into this process, and probably a lot of painful discussions as well. And it's huge that you've made the commitment, and it is very much appreciated, and that we are looking forward to working together as we move forward through time. I think the joint session with Planning Commission in May is a great idea. Lay out some of the concepts there and actually talk through them in a sort of a roundtable setting. That's always a healthy way to do the discussion. I'm really curious about what you'll bring forward to us in a number of areas, in particular around the Mountain District business zoning, and what you envision there, what that map looks like in your mind. So that'll be quite interesting. It's really interesting how you've called out a number of things that we would have, of course, have expected, and that your concerns about septic systems are valid, and that the health of the river is called out specifically in terms of the Raymond Riverside components of actions, that you're really thinking about that stewardship piece of what's in your vision, and that's exactly the right track to be on. appreciate the question too about how the house size side of the equation, the visibility and solar panels. I'm really curious about what measurable concepts you'll be able to come up with around the visibility piece, because that's been a discussion that we've had in this room a number of times, and elsewhere too. So really interested in what you bring forward as you look at that particular question. And as Will stated, in terms of the solar panels, that sort of thing, there are some abilities that you have already that are in place that you may want to explore. But just to remind you that, in terms of the solar panels, it's partly impact on neighbors and, again, the visibility piece. And Ben mentioned the comprehensive plan, and I think when you look at the overall picture, you do need to remember that we are under the umbrella of that comprehensive plan, and to understand where some of your strategies and thoughts fit. The advisory committee is really an interesting idea, and I'm not sure right now what sort of form it would take. A lot of times with local improvement districts, there's a specific role that an advisory committee has. That's not necessarily what we're talking about here, so it'll be interesting to see what sort of form it should actually take. And again, don't have enough specifics to really speak to it. Just one quick comment about the technology goal. This is one that's very interesting to me, that I would love to see where we can take this to get you high-speed internet and the cell service that you need in the mountains, and what that could possibly look like. Maybe some interesting pilot kind of strategies that we haven't explored and that may come around as we work through this process. So I guess all in all, what I would say is I'm excited to see how far you've come, and again, really appreciate the extraordinary effort that everyone has put in, and we look forward to working with you in partnership as we go into the next few months and into the end of your timeline to end of 2010 and having a plan in place.
So I heard a couple of things in the remarks. Thank you for your support and unity and seeing all the hard work that's going on. I think you'll be delighted when we come to the table with some concrete options. I don't think we're going to have options that aren't viable. I do think we're going to have conflict with some of our values and principles that are certainly ongoing right now in the discussions. It appears to me that we need to consider getting back with you sooner than May with our outline proposals that are going to go out to the survey and capture some input there. I heard that was something we should take care of, and we will certainly get moving forward on a work session. The work groups are interfacing with different departments within the county as we move forward, so it's not like we're going to have our first work session. It'll be a big surprise, but I think it will be good to have everybody in the same room and capture thoughts and ideas. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add before I'm done? The community does not take this process lightly, and these decisions are not easy for us to make. We certainly are not the experts in policy making, but we are experts in preserving the lifestyle that we all live there for. And we recognize that your willingness to embrace this process. We are grateful for the leadership that Gary has provided through the process, and we look forward to having our messages heard and finding compromise in ways that really do support the values of the community. So thank you.
Great. Thanks very much. Thanks, Gary, too. Thanks, everyone, for being here today. We really appreciate it.